All right, we're back at it. Another edition of Celtics Beat. This is going to be a fun one, a little bit different. Normally, we would be, harping over what happened the last time for the Celtics and losing in Atlanta and falling below 500. And I guess, we'll get to some of that a little bit later on, but much rather spend time on our featured guest, of course, and what he has been up to. Dan Shaughnessy, long of the Boston Globe, good friend, and Evan Valenti, Adam Kaufman, of course, we're always here with you. But Dan, how are you, man?
I'm good, Adam. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm especially thrilled to have you here, of course, because you've written multiple times about the Celtics. You've written multiple books in general, north of a dozen books. We were talking previously, but I mean, I remember, of course, Curse of the Bambino and then Reversing the Curse and Terry Francona. You've written about Fenway Park. The list goes on and on. But now we've got something that Celtics fans can really dive into beyond. You've written about Red Auerbach as well. But the team, just so interesting in the mid 80s to the late 80s and that championship era and dynasty and the Larry Bird Celtics. You've got a new book, of course. It is out. People can pick it up. It's called Wish It Lasted Forever, Life with Larry Bird Celtics. That's it. Looks great. And
right there.
People should be eager to dive in. What I'm always curious about, just to kind of a generic start to this thing, but it's important, is where these ideas come from and how the brainchild ultimately gets put to paper, and just the process of getting this thing out there into the world. What brought this on for you?
Well, I was the Celtic beat reporter for the 4 seasons starting 82-83 into 85-86. Bob Ryan had gone to TV. What an idiot. He went from the Globe into TV, just like what young Chris Gasper just did. And then, then he came back to the Globe. But in any way, when he was the god, he was the Bible of NBA coverage, really invented the Sunday Notes columns and all that. So Commissioner Bob Ryan, he leaves. I had just been brought back. I covered high schools for the Globe and all that stuff when I was at Holy Cross. And then I went to Baltimore and Washington for 5 years and covered the Orioles. And then lo and behold, I was rehired as a full-timer in 81. Bob Ryan goes a year later, he goes away to TV. And they needed a guy to do the Celtic beat, which was, a great beat to jump into. And I was equipped for it. I had played high school basketball and I covered the BNBL. I covered a lot of colleges and I like the sport. I know a little bit about it. So it was a little bit tough to leave baseball at that time. Sorry, the phone thing there. Let's get rid of that. But a little bit tough to leave baseball at that time.
Guy right now.
But now look at this. It's just going to be gone forever.
This is what happens when you're on a book tour, Danny.
Well, you know what it is. It's Bob Ryan. He heard you called him an idiot, and he's calling you right up.
It did not happen. So, having done Major League Baseball for 5 years, it was a good preparation to go and cover a beat and cover a team. And in those days, it was really covering a beat was immersion. We were like with them all the time. So, commercial air travel and hotels, buses. It was like being on the team, except for the fame and the groupies and the money. We were like on the team, but we were with them all the time. And I can tell you, during the pandemic, when there was no ball, we were all starving. And there was, the Last Dance was kind of appointment TV. So on Sunday nights, people that were living in my house, got a lot of family members, watch The Last Dance. And, I'm seeing my, 32-year-old self sitting at the table. In those days, they didn't sell those seats. They hadn't figured it out yet. The lowly media sat right next to the bench. And we were right on the floor where the stat crew is between the benches. And you heard a lot and we were on it. So in the videos, and then, Comcast was showing the Celtics classics of the 80s because there's no games. So you're seeing Bill Walton and Larry Bird and Dennis Johnson and all that. And again, there's my 28-year-old self, giant Michael Caine glasses and big hair. And like, oh man, I've been telling those stories about that era for like 30 years in bar rooms and entertaining the other writers and all these great Larry Bird stories, because we really were able to tell the readers what they were like because we were with them all the time. And, when the bubble was instituted and the COVID bubble and the NBA came back in the summer, the empty arena down there. I remember when the Globe sent Washburn went down there and we had to pay like 55 or 60,000 to get a reporter in. And then the guy Wash had to quarantine for 2 weeks. And there was a waiver. You signed a waiver that said, I will not approach any athlete or coach if I see him, at any time. So you had to agree to that. Well, that's what we did all of our best work, waiting for bags, having beers in the hotel afterwards, on the bus, just hanging out because we were always with them. And it's nobody's fault. You young guys, we love you. You get to cover the team now, but you don't get near Brown and Tatum and Smart the way we were near these guys or the coach. So it's been frustrating just as a reader, and I know it is for the poor reporters to try and fish out what's going on with those guys and who likes who. And really, Wash went at the bubble. Wash saw the fight or heard the fight. When they were throwing
Marcus Smart losing his mind in the locker room,
all that stuff. So if we hadn't had a guy there, no one would have known that. So who knows what's going on when we're not there? And that couldn't happen when we were covering the team in the 80s because we were always with them. So the combination of seeing that, and then during the pandemic, I mean, everybody thought, 9 months after the pandemic, be a bunch of babies born. And I'm like, no, it's going to be a bunch of books coming out because everybody's home, got nothing to do, and you can call people and reach them. I mean, you can call anybody during the pandemic, they're home. Where else are you going to be? So that was an asset. And my agent, kind of prodded me. Every time I do one of these, I'm like, it's the last one. I'm cranky. I don't need it. But I said, okay, we'll send a pitch, and it was bought by Simon & Schuster, Scribner, publisher. And so, okay, so I just spit it out in the course of doing the Globe column. And of course, we're not going as many places, so it was easier. You were always home, and cranked it out over the course of the year. And now we're in newsstands, or what do you call bookstores, your local bookstores. You want to support those folks, the hard work at local bookstores. And if you can't get there, just go on Amazon, and God knows they'll get it to you in a half hour. So that's there. And wish it lasted forever. Life with the Larry Bird Celtics. And again, everybody knows who won those games. Everybody knows Larry's stats, who was Hall of Fame and all that. No attempt to do play-by-play on all that stuff, but what you will get is understanding what that dynamic was like, how great they were, what great teamwork they had, how secure they were in their own greatness. There wasn't a lot of who's getting the touches, and you won't see them, hugging the other team after the games or conspiring to join each other on another team next year. There was none of that. And again, this is the old guy, get off my lawn. We don't need to be that guy all the time, but I'm trying not to promote this book as it was so much better then than it is now. But, that's what some of the old guys do. And it is fun to get back in time. And when you read about these guys, just the personalities they had, and it really comes forward. And I enjoyed doing it. I ran down most of them, I don't know, 13 or 14 guys, and, had them amplify the old stuff with observations or comments about what was going on all those years ago. And guy like how Max is, he's great on everything, and same with ML Carr, and Rick Carlisle was helpful, and McHale and Walton. They really got into it. So it's a lot of fun, and that's the genesis of the project. And the book just came out this week, and we're doing good.
So did you reconnect with Bird along the way too?
That was an interesting one. I told the publisher, I'm not promising Bird on this, because just if you're going to buy it, you need to know that he's probably not happening. And that proved true, and it was fine. I think, he could have amplified a few things, but for the most part, no. He's not particularly introspective, but he was fun back there. All this fun comes out, and I have a lot from him. His voice is very prominent in this. Just stuff in bars, on the bus, in the hotel. He liked to break chops. He noticed everything. He called me Scoop. I wasn't particularly trustworthy, or they weren't ever that comfortable around me. Like, I'd come into the locker room, Larry'd say, Scoop, do you notice how quiet it gets when you walk in here? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I can live with that. But he was like, noticed everything. Like, when you go to school, certain guys are agitators or instigators or gossips. He was like one of those guys. And I remember we were in Portland, and there was a forward from North Carolina State, I think. It was Kenny Carr. And he coned me with a pass during the warmups. I was down, my head down, typing, and Aaron Pass got away and blasted me in the head. My glasses broke, went flying off, and Kenny Carr came over to Polly. And Bird's at the other end. He noticed everything. He saw that. He couldn't wait to hunt me down in the bar that night back at the hotel. He got like 47 against some Trailblazers, but all he cared about was getting in my face. He says, Scoop, I saw that. You was pissed. He says, your glasses went flying and the whole thing. You know how he could get. So it was that kind of like back and forth stuff. And the book's loaded with those kinds of stories. And so I just, I made every effort with Larry. I have his cell phone. He's turned off the faucets, and this should be obvious to you guys, but I guess if you pay him and you do a commercial or something, he appears. I'm glad, because I was worried about his health. I know he became a granddad, and he's Social Security eligible, and he's got a no-show job at the Pacers now. But most of the time in Florida, we see him at a spring training. He likes the baseball. He comes over to Fort Myers every now and then. and Indiana. But the kids are grown. I think his daughter works for the Pacers. And just like I said, shut off the faucets. Max couldn't get him to help him with his book. I mean, I would take that personally if I played with him for 9 years, whatever, and won 2 championships. I mean,
Yeah.
That's really shutting off the faucets. And I know that like Bob, Ryan, and Jackie, they both did biographies with Larry. They would stay at his house. They were in the inner circle, and he's not returning their calls either. So I didn't take it personally. He wasn't calling me back. But again, really, you don't even notice. And it wouldn't have, I'm not sure would have helped that much. Some guys having him now, it helped a lot. In Larry's case, I had so much from the old days. It's all I needed.
Well, did you think about maybe sending him a beer? I know that your relationship with him got off to a sort of a rocky start. You detail it in the book about sending him and the crew a beer over, and then doing it again and realizing you were already in the doghouse with two complimentary beers.
He did not warm up to strangers well. I understood that. He's shy, and he didn't like thinking people were trying to buy him or everybody needing something from him, and pushed back on that. He wouldn't have been a social media guy if he were playing today. He didn't like having his picture taken. He hated it at the airport when he was kind of found a quiet corner, and some jackass would go by and say, "Hey, there's Larry Bird." And then all of a sudden people around him and want autographs, and he just wanted his privacy. He used to go to the movies in the afternoon, Chestnut Hill. I'd see him over there. And, of course, we're like, how come you go to the movie? Well, number one, it was in the afternoon. There was nobody in the theater, so he could hide out. He had a hat on. And number two, it was cheaper. Matinees were cheaper, which for Larry, that meant a lot. I actually had a road rage incident with him. I was driving by Fenway Park because, he lived in Brookline down at the end of Route 9 and back there where Hellenic College was. And I was getting near Fenway. I'm coming in on Park Drive, turning onto Boylston Street, and this giant Cadillac is being a real dick the way this car is driving. It was almost as if the car was trying to provoke me. I was flaring. And, all of a sudden I like roar up against this guy, and I look over and it's him. He picked me out. He saw me. So he was messing with me in traffic. And he loved that he got under my skin unknowing that it was him. I mean, that's stuff that used to happen.
You think back to obviously you mentioned a lot that we want to, dive further into in terms of coverage and then and now and basketball itself and all of it. But, so many stories, whether it's in the book or stories that I've heard you tell along the way over the years that we've known each other, or stories that are, in Max's new book, like you alluded to as well. They are, they revolve around going out, drinking, all of it. And, I think it's really interesting. I was talking to a buddy of mine about this, just sort of like questions about that era versus what it's like now. And I'm not sitting here pretending that players today don't drink. They drink plenty. They party hard. They have a great time, obviously. But, one big difference is now, you have all the advances in nutrition and technology, and like guys like LeBron James spending more than $1 million a year just on his body back then. And you were around it, you were right there in the bars too. Like the amount of beer consumption from athletes back then, basketball players back then versus now, I can't even imagine that either it compares or it just compares even remotely the same way. How did guys go out and have success when they were treating their bodies as they did then versus now?
Well, there was there's some big truths to that. And guys weren't as fit then as they are now. And there was an element of playing yourself into shape, November, December. Red way back in the 60s, he pushed back on that. So you look back at the Red Auerbach, Russell Celtics, they killed people in November because, all these old white guys were just, using November to get into shape. And it was different. And they had off-season jobs and all that stuff. So the Celtics, Red, he got them in shape, and they would torch people at the start of the season. It got them great starts every year as part of their strategy. When I was covering the 80s, it was much better, of course, and they were more fit, more conditioned. And, they're just kind of naturally gifted in most cases. But guys, the Celtics had a guy named Rick Roby, who was he's from Kentucky. He was 6'11" listed, but Larry called him footer because he said, you're a footer, you're a 7-footer. And, Larry had a long history with this guy because Joe B. Hall had recruited him to Kentucky. Larry wanted to play at Kentucky when he was in high school. Where he lives, Kentucky was kind of the blue chip program along with Indiana to the north. And Joe B. Hall thought he couldn't get a shot off in the SEC. And they brought in Rick Roby, who was slower, but he was 7 feet. And they won a national championship with Roby. And so they end up at the Celtics together. And Roby's to this day, still a good old boy, drinking buddy, Kentucky, ended up moving to Florida, of course, and his son played football for the Gators. But Roby ran with Larry. They were like-minded guys. And of course, Roby was only playing like 8 minutes a night, and Larry had to get out there. And so Larry was the one paying the price for this lifestyle that they had on the road. And Red traded Roby for Dennis Johnson. He got a Hall of Fame guard because Phoenix they gave up on this guy way too early. Coach didn't like him, and Red sees that opportunity. He needed a physical guard. He gets a Hall of Fame guard. It's coming into the prime of his career for Rick Roby, who played, I don't know, another year or two, never did anything. Good guy. But it wasn't just the basketball. Part of it was to get Roby the hell out of town. And Larry was MVP the next 3 years. It was not a coincidence. It was a dual effect trade, bringing in an all-star guard and getting rid of the guy who was keeping Larry out at night. So that was part of it. Are we allowed to use bad words because it's a podcast?
Yeah, what the hell? I won't tell.
I just one, but Max will tell you, Max had the routine. There was the McDonald's across the street. I don't know if it's still there on Causeway, but there was. And, so he'd send Francis O'Brien could tell you this, the ball boy is still there. He's 70 years old. They'd go get bags of hamburgers, and Max would eat a bag of hamburgers before the game. And, we wrote about that, and I, Larry's like, don't be writing about that. People think, we don't take care of ourselves. He says, that's the worst part of this job. He says, is staying in shape and, conditioning and diet and all that. He says, I'll tell you, he says, when I'm done playing, I'll be the fattest fuck you ever saw. He says, because I have no intention of staying with this regimen. He said, it's too hard. And he said, I'm just as bad as Max or anybody else. And then the one year he hurt his back, and this was a little later, and he was away from the thing for a couple of weeks, and he gained, I don't know, he said, I gained like 7-10 pounds while I was shut down for those 2 weeks. He said, I was eating wedding cakes every day. And we were like, why would you do that? He goes, who'd fuck up a wedding cake? They're good. It was the thing. So that was his mentality was, a wedding cake is by definition going to be good cake. So he ate only wedding cakes while he was on the shelf and gained all this weight. So yeah, he was funny talking about that. But, a guy like Robert Parrish never gained any weight and was run the floor. He still looks like that. He's 68 years old and just stayed with that body. The whole Jerry Henderson was like that. I mean, I don't mean to say that guys were fat and sloppy and out of shape. You can't play the sport, as you know, to do that. But it was not quite the regimen that you have today.
All things Celtics going back to the mid to late 80s on to where we are today. Of course, Stan Shaughnessy, wish it lasted forever. All those Larry Bird years and a lot of great Larry Bird stories in there. And there's so much. I have plenty more questions as well, but I have monopolized this thing so far. So Evan, please go ahead.
I just find it interesting because we talk about going out to the bar and hanging out with guys and understanding the team dynamic and chemistry and all that stuff. And today, you talked about it in the book, and I thought it was really interesting to listen to, or at least read, the difference between coverage, right? And today with the bubble, you talked about having to sign the waiver, et cetera, and it doesn't seem like we've gone enough back the other way. I mean, I totally get why. I mean, it's health and safety protocols, all that stuff. Do you have a fear, Dan, that we will no longer, I mean, we obviously the access was already restricted before we hit the pandemic, right? You don't have that same dynamic and you've talked about it, Jackie Max talked about it, Bob Ryan's talked about it all over the place for the past couple of years. But at what point do we say, like, these, journalists have a job to do, and what teams are doing now is really getting in the way of them doing their job to the fullest extent? Do you think there's a time where we can go back the other way and maybe get some of that access back?
No, it never goes that way. It's like in a collective bargaining situation. As soon as you give up stuff, you never get it back, and that's why you're so protective of it. I just feel like it's kind of over, and this is the new world. It's evolution. I don't push back on it. I don't complain about it, but it's so hard for you guys today, and it's kind of a waste of time. I mean, guys do what they can do, but when you're Zooming with the coach, everybody's getting the same questions, the same answers. I mean, you don't get rewarded for doing your own work, developing relationships. You very rarely do. And it's just, this is the way the teams want it. And again, eliminate the middleman. I understand for them. Just have the fans reading team sites, fan sites, stay away from the neutrality or anyone who's going to be critical or subjective or just, kind of crush them or call them out on stuff. You don't get that on the team site. And why deal with it? We saw it evolve a little bit when I'm there. There's a scene in the book where the PR guy says, we don't need you guys anymore. We're selling out all of our games. Stop bitching about access. And we didn't have much to complain about, but now it's just the way they manage it. I mean, the NFL's been doing this for decades and gotten better and better at it. Now it's coming everywhere. And like in baseball, that clubhouse may never come back. And of course, the players don't want us in there. It's so much better if their workplace to not have us in there. I understand that. So to get it back, I think they can use an abundance of caution to keep us out of there forever. And I just don't think it's coming back. So, it's like this year's team and last year's team, we don't know what the hell's going on with them. And that's kind of the way they like it. It's less awkward for them.
Well, the problem that creates is now it's all speculation. I mean, the other day I got fired, and it shows the state of journalism today, but I got fired up the other day. EEI has this clip that circulates all over the place about, is there some like secret rift between Marcus Smart and Jayson Tatum? Like, we don't even know. You're making that up. Like, you're just making that up because we don't know. And it actually hurts. Not only it might get back in the locker room, hurt their relationship. It's possible. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it's possible. You end up, and then you have people like me who get upset and then go on Twitter and just, go crazy about it. And it doesn't, my issue is because of the lack of inclusion of access for guys, we're now just left for blatant speculation and just making things up. And maybe sometimes that sticks. And what happens is like somebody gets one thing right because they happen to throw a million dart throws and eventually you get right one time. It just leads to it. I don't like where we're headed. I don't like it because it doesn't give us any clear picture at all whatsoever. Like, as you brought up, last year's team, this year's team, sun's off, but we have no idea what's going on behind closed doors, what's going on in me. They had a team meeting. Oh no, it was really a group dinner. It's like, well, what really was it? And am I supposed to believe Ime Udoka is going to come out and say, yeah, we had a plan? I mean, I can take him at his word, I guess, but we have no clue what's going on. And unless you're Woj or unless you're Shams, who's getting it from the agent side of things, we're never going to know. It's just, it drives me crazy because we don't get a clear picture of what's really happening in the sport. And it just hurts the consumer, so to speak.
I agree. And, unfortunately, the consumer, they hate us so much that they don't want to hear us complain about it. They just take it as, well, you guys are just butthurt because they're not making it easy for you. And they don't realize we're butthurt because we can't tell you what's going on. And so, and increasingly the fans, the readers, they hate the media so much, they don't care, or they don't want to hear anybody, you guys are complaining about that, go screw, you don't need to be in there anyway. And it's like, wait, I'm only in there because I assume you want to know what the hell's going on. So you can't win that one. It's evolved in a bad way. And I feel your pain. I don't think it's going to get better.
Well, I think just an extension of that, Dan, it's got to drive someone like you crazy, obviously, who's made your career out of being a journalist and not just writing books, but not just being a columnist, being a beat writer. And, there's no accountability anymore. Once upon a time, accountability mattered. You couldn't just make things up. And if you did, or even if you didn't, you went with one source instead of two, or whatever it may be, you were given bad information, you reported something, it turned out to be wrong. Like, that mattered. Once upon a time, that mattered. Now you have people putting things out left. I mean, look at just a stupid recent example. Look at the Odell Beckham sweepstakes the other day when he was a free agent. I mean, this reporter said he was going to the Rams. This reporter said he was going to the Packers. This reporter said it was one, then it was the other, but he hadn't decided. This reporter said, well, the Patriots are still in the mix. And ultimately, nobody's right until a decision is made. And then maybe if you guessed it right along the way, congrats, you had it first. Yeah. But that's where we're at in modern day journalism. And it's so, I know that it exists that way because for the most part, the consumer doesn't care. The consumer just wants the news whenever the news comes to be. It's not about, necessarily breaking stories anymore being right. It's just breaking stories and being first. And if you were right, congrats. And if you weren't, you weren't. There are no ramifications anymore. It's got to drive you nuts.
Well, yeah, I just kind of, again, I'm so old. I'm not out there a lot like I used to be. And I just kind of gave up on that. It's like, well, I'm glad I had the years that I had, and I know what I know, and it's helpful to see it from a distance, so you can kind of have a little perspective, but deep down, we're not finding out what is going on, and it is frustrating.
There were some, I think a lot of the reporters out there do a very, very good job. And I think generally speaking, team reporters are certainly better than national reporters, but, national reporters are, they're part of the job is, it depends. If you're a host, it's spewing hot takes. If you're a, if you're a Woj or a Shams, it's, again, relationships are a big part of it. Do you think that, today's reporter is just too protective of player and team relationships over ultimately just giving you what is the best story, the best content?
Yeah, I'm so cynical and suspicious that they're always lying to me. I push back on all that. I just assume that they're lying and just covering up. So I'm looking for communists under every rock, and it doesn't endear you to the teams when you're around them, and they know that. So I don't get a lot of people whispering in my ear, because if I know it, Danny lied to me last year, and I've known Danny for 40 years, and I remember I said to him like 2 weeks before they all changed jobs, and I said, "Can you tell me you're going to still be here after the season?" He said, "Yes." So I went with that, just a little part of a bit larger thing, but I wanted to have that on record because I had a sense of the troubled waters here. And then, of course, less than 12 hours after they lost the last game, everything had changed. He was gone, the whole thing. And when I got back to him, like within a week, I said, "Just so we're clear, like, did something change, or were you lying back when you talked to me then?" And he said, "Yeah, I kind of knew then, but I couldn't tell you because I knew you'd write it." I'm like, "Well, thank you. I think that's good." But, and he said, "Yeah, I hope I never have to do that again." But yeah, you got me there, as I did know, and I couldn't tell you at that time. And it was, that kind of flies in the face of the whole religion and all that stuff. So he didn't feel good about it. And but he said, I knew if I tried to tell you off the record that you'd still write it, because if I know it, yeah, I mean, that's important. And they always have to lie, but he tried not to do it as much and tried to honor that. But he admitted it when it did happen.
So do you believe then, after the fact, obviously what we've come to know since, the lying notwithstanding, that everything went down as they've said it went down, or did something change? Was this, a little bit more of a surprise than the months long plan that they laid out after the fact?
I think that he knew he was going to step down, like within 2 weeks of when it happened. And, one of the tells on that's going to be what happens with him moving forward. If he shows up in Utah or Phoenix, working for a team at any kind of high level, that would be a tell that maybe this wasn't as much his idea as theirs or whatever. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's just going to be a hanger on, and I don't think he's going to take a big job somewhere else. Why would he? Who needs that?
I mean, I don't know. Paycheck's always nice, I'm sure, but
he doesn't need the money.
He's got a lot, big family to spend time with. So I totally get why he would say. But it's funny, we had that on our rundown of like, we got to ask him about that exact question, because it was like not too long after that you had that came out that he was going to be gone. So it was interesting to see the reversal happen so quickly. But we look at this team now, and it's driving everybody nuts. The inconsistency of night to night, what you're going to get, the mixture of Jaylen and Jayson doesn't work. Smart, calling out the team. Ime's, trying to figure out, what this team is and how we can put his imprint on it. What are your early takeaways of this year's Celtics here, Dan?
Well, let me ask you guys. You're there all the time. So they took 42 threes last night and made 11. I mean,
yeah. So this is where Adam and I sort of differ on opinion here. This drives Adam crazy. I don't mind if they're good ones.
What's the average three? What's the average they take in a game?
A lot. That's
it's I mean, they're right there toward, if not at the top of the league.
I'll look it up.
Is 42 normal? That's normal.
Yeah,
I know you're gonna make.
Yeah, and it's so funny you bring that up, because when Max comes on, he and I.
He never made one in his career,
Yeah, I mean, he and I commiserate over the number of threes that are, taken in today's game. You were talking, obviously, much earlier in the show about like, old man on porch or shaking fist at cloud and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that stuff. But it's not, just in the way teams are covered. For me, like, the one thing we didn't ask you about was, what about basketball itself? Like, I get yelled at every time I tweet about how, I just think that basketball used to be better than it is today.
Yeah.
And look, I love basketball, but to me, the like living between the the 3-point lines and like Jayson Tatum being scared of contact and not going anywhere near getting the number of free throws he should be getting, and some of that obviously is the officiating, but more of it is just him not throwing himself into that. And I know people harp all the time on Marcus Smart taking 7-8 threes a game when he's not that good a shooter. He's not that much an above average shooter. It's just like today's basketball in its simplest summation is, unless you're the Golden State Warriors and you got a Steph Curry and some of the other guys that can shoot that way, if you're built the way the Boston Celtics are, and so many teams around the NBA are, I just don't feel it is that compelling a brand of basketball. But it's where we're at today. It's not going to change it. Like you talked about, it's not going back the other way. But I mean, what do you think of basketball then versus now?
Well, again, I'm trying not to promote this book, as I said, with, the game was so much better then, but it was, and it's nobody's fault. Again, it's just evolution, but I have a hard time staying with it. I don't like 42 threes. I mean, Larry took 2 a game, I think, and he could make them. I mean, they had Scott Wedman, Jerry Seasting, Danny Ainge, they had marksmen, and that would translate to today, but it just wasn't part of the game. And it was much more fluid, a little bit of a low post game. The passing, and you've seen the videos of the passing of the 85-86 Celtics, greatest passing team of all time. Danny would try to get back in the games in garbage time just to be on the floor with Walton, to be on the other end of those passes. That's how it was. And it was there was more body contact, more hand checking and bruising down there. They would all foul out in the first quarter now. I think that's true. But a lot of whistles now, the reviews, and it's tough. I just the skill level, we know what the skill level is. I mean, Kevin Durant, guys, they're just so good. I understand that, but I don't find it that pleasing to watch by and large. I'm kind of in the wait for the playoffs mode with the thing now. It's just and the load management, the nights off. I was at that game with the Bucks last week and there was nobody there. I mean, I know Giannis had an ankle thing or something, but guys said it was COVID and it was load management, and they had like one starter on their team. It was not
Middleton
fun.
was out, Lopez was out.
Yeah, it was tough.
It was Drew Holiday. That was basically it.
Just to provide some context here, the Minnesota Timberwolves lead the league in threes attempted a game at 42.6, so 40.
Oh my God.
Golden State's 2, so they're 42 a game. So that's normal for Golden State. But when you have Steph Curry, who's the greatest of all time in terms of shooting a 3-point shot, I'm okay with that.
The Celtics have to be top 10.
What's up?
Celtics have to be top 10.
Let me tell you, they're not. They're at 12 at 36 and a half a game.
36 now. Okay.
The top 10 in order is Minnesota, Golden State, Utah, Milwaukee, Portland, Dallas, Orlando, LA, Knicks, and Thunder. Those are your top 10.
I'm shocked.
Thank you.
I am.
That's helpful.
But just to provide some context, that's all.
Dan Shaughnessy here with us, and the great book, Wish It Lasted Forever, Life with the Larry Bird Celtics. Look, I mean, I'm sure even the great Red Auerbach, Dan, had his detractors at some point in time. We know Brad Stevens did more recently. Are you a believer in Ime Udoka with what you've seen so far, not even a quarter of the way through the year?
I want to believe. I really like him. I got to meet him last week, and I love the way he carries himself in these Zoomers. And I liked when he talked about getting punked right out of the gate and talking about going to shoot around. We aren't going to win tonight. These guys carry this out to the court. And I thought that stuff was great. I worry he's going to pull back on that a little bit, because I don't know if the AAU Warriors can handle that kind of bluntness from their coach. So we'll see how that plays. I hope it stays. I don't know much about him other than that. I mean, it's always good cop, bad cop, and he's on another team, and they liked him. And I think, Brown and Tatum were consulted on this, so they better play their ass off for him. And I hope they're doing that. I wonder what practice is like, what's being coached with all the ISO ball and the 42 threes last night. And after timeout stuff at the end of games, it has not been overwhelming to this point. So we'll see. Hopefully it gets better. And I know there's problems there that maybe can't be fixed, but Brad should know the dysfunction of the roster better than anybody. And give this guy a chance to get out of the gate. I hope he gets a fair shot here because I want to see him succeed.
Well, the good news is their defense has turned around quite a bit since the opening couple of games, where what looked like a disaster. They've become, I think, a top 5 defense in the league over the past couple of weeks, and have been able to cut down on the communication mistakes. It seems like, guys are getting used to the system. So at least, and that was the one thing coming in, right? He was supposed to be a defensive-minded head coach that, would shore up things on that end, because the year prior was an absolute mess defensively. I mean, and that's one of the calling cards of Brad Stevens' team, to hustle and defense. Didn't have that last year, and looked like to start the year they didn't have that. But at least it looks to me, just looking from where we're at, on a TV screen, the defensive stuff has at least gotten better a little bit. So I'm a little more. I'm with you. I want him to be. I was a part of the maybe the conductor of the Ime Udoka train when it first came out that they were looking to hire him. Considering his steps along the way, being a Greg Popovich disciple, so to speak, was a good way to break yourself into the league. And then, of course, with Philly, with Doc Rivers, and spent some time in Brooklyn. He was the James Harden whisperer. I like hearing all that stuff. I like the commitment to defense, and it looks like they're getting back to their ways in that regard. But offensively, I'm not quite sure where they're headed here. Tatum is taking a lot of responsibility in terms of trying to be the guy that does everything for them. I'm not sure if that's going to be the way they should play. I mean, that's offensively, I think we still have some questions. And I think when you look at this team and how they're put together, I'm not quite sure if it makes sense all the way around. I like some of the guys, but I think with Ime, consistency is going to be the big thing. How can they get consistent play out of everybody? And it drives everybody crazy when certain guys play a lot one night and don't the next night. And I think that's the biggest thing I think people have a problem with, is just the consistency on this team night in, night out. And that's the great teams play consistent. The good teams are not. That's the difference. And I'm hoping that Ime can find a way to kind of turn the page, so to speak, and get them to be a little more consistent night in, night out.
Dan, once upon a time, like I said, you obviously were, for a number of years, as you talked about earlier, you were there every day. You're covering this team, not this team, but, those teams of the 80s. And even if you were there every day right now, with the way the coverage has changed, and of course, pandemic related, as we mentioned as well, you wouldn't be able to have all those up close discussions with guys that you could have way back when. So watching, I guess, somewhat from afar, and having seen the talent that you have come through over the last 40 years, or do you believe that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown are the guys to take the Celtics where it is they're looking to go? As individually talented as they obviously are, do you like them to coexist? Do you like them to be, part of your, I don't know, big three if they're looking to form another one? Obviously, it seems like you need to do that in today's NBA. Are you all about these guys being, the next guys that take you to the promised land in terms of winning banner 18?
I wish I knew more. I know what I see. I see the talent level. Tatum, obviously the upside's enormous. What his skills. I don't know what's in his heart. I worry about that. I worry about the closeness with Beal, and if he's down with this place and whatnot. It's just hard to read it, and I don't buy the youth thing anymore. This is his 5th year, and it's Brown's 6th year. And I know they were young when they came to it. They weren't fully formed adults. Larry Bird's 23 his rookie year. 5 years of college. You look at it, so different. But that's long enough to figure out the NBA. And I just hope it's not all about selling Subway sandwiches, getting your brand. We're seeing a lot of that. That stuff seems to be emphasized and more important. I don't like the way it's been. I see he's just, to me, he just stops. He just quits some nights, just, goes to the motions. And I think I like Brown's attitude a little bit more of what I see on the court, but we're not around it. I mean, smart, we love, he's a defensive back, and, you want him on the court at the end of games. He's aggressive and he can get the ball back for you. Red would have liked Smart a lot, I think, but it's tough sledding, and I'm running out of patience with it. And I don't know. I mean, they were in the conference finals 3 out of 4 years, and it's going the wrong way now. So let's go pick it up.
Yeah, that's everybody's favorite question. Can Brown and Tatum?
I'm in. Let's go.
I'm with you, because I like. It's hard to get caught up sometimes as a fan. Like, I want to watch Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown play together. I enjoy watching them. I enjoy the camaraderie that they show on the court. but does the fit make sense? Can you have two wing players be the centerpiece of your franchise? And if they aren't, do you think that the fact that let me try and phrase this correctly here, because we've been obsessed with player movement and trading this guy for this guy, and are we getting too impatient? Maybe, Dan, is the question with these two guys, or
No.
as you said,
No, we are not.
But we're already talking about you have to trade one of them to make this work. I mean, that's to me,
5-6 years is a long look. I mean,
Right.
guys, I don't think Kareem Lou Alcindor wasn't in Milwaukee for 5 or 6 years, and he was moved. I mean, no, it's time. Let's go.
All right, well, we're gonna go too, but we encourage you to go to Amazon or your favorite bookstore. Check out Dan's new book. I'm sure he can show it to us again.
Well, there it is. One more time. One last time.
Yeah, Wish It Lasted Forever. Life with the Larry Bird Celtics. Make sure you check it out. It's really I'm just starting to get into it, and it's I mean, having heard a lot of these stories working with Dan in the past, it's so fun to see him in print, obviously, and whether it's I don't even think we mentioned the playing basketball with Larry Bird for money and him playing with the money in his socks out there for the game, and all of just a lot of really cool stories from back then that you should definitely check out, because Access, we've harped on this. Access was so different and so much better than it is today, with obviously, as Dan mentioned, team controlled sites, the evolution of social media being what it is today, and certainly not what it was. I mean, it wasn't a thing back then. So we encourage that you check it out. Again, Wish It Lasted Forever, Life with Larry Bird Celtics, Amazon, or wherever else you pick up your books. We thank all of you out there for listening. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We always tell you way too late in the show. Next week, we'll, I don't know, whoever we'll have on with us, we'll get more into, today's Celtics, but wanted to do something a little bit different with, such a great book out there for the people to turn back the clocks a little bit. Remember what it felt like to win championships around here. I know some people feel a little detached. So for Evan Valenti, I'm Adam Kaufman. Dan Shaughnessy, thank you so much for being on with us, and we really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you guys for having me. Good luck.
All right, this is Celtics Beat. We'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you.